Chapter 8. I Want to be Part of the Fugees. For most of the Fugees, tryouts meant the end of weeks of boredom. There was little to do in Clarkson in the summer but sweat. We just stayed home, Bien said, describing his summer. We didn't do nothing. Without soccer, life was boring. Bien could hardly wait for tryouts. There wasn't much drama in it for him. He knew that a one-year veteran, he would make the team. But he was curious to see what kind of new talent would show up and to see the team's new field. Bien had grown up playing soccer in a refugee camp in Mozambique, on a patch of bare earth with goals marked by small piles of rocks. He had been impressed with the field at the Clarkson Community Center. It had grass, proper soccer goals with nets, lights overhead that allowed for practice when the sun set early in the fall, and he appreciated the grassy fields for the Fugees' competitors. But by far his favorite, though, had been a field of artificial turf he'd played on at one away match. It was fast, and shots and passes rolled, especially true on the smooth surface. When Bien got word that tryouts would be at the field behind Indian Creek Elementary, he stopped by to have a look. Wow, he thought, it's like Africa. As the word of the upcoming Fugees tryouts spread around Clarkson, kids began to prepare. Some went jogging to get in shape. The pickup games in the parking lots around town began to attract more players and to get more intense. It wasn't just that the Fugees team was the only free soccer program in Clarkson. More than that, the Fugees offered a chance to play the game the way the pros did, on a grand scale, in a big open space with room for beautiful crosses, arcing corner kicks, and long, elegant shots that touched the tips of the keeper's fingers. The Fugees had practices and uniforms, and they traveled all over the state, a big draw to kids who rarely left Clarkson. The boys' parents understood that soccer with Luma was safe, unlike the games in the parking lots of the apartment complexes, which often took place near drug dealers and young men with too much time on their hands. Luma would be coaching 3 different teams within the Fugees program: the under-13 Fugees, for boys 13 and younger, the under-15s, and the under-17s. There were veteran players returning to each squad. Bien, Grace, and Jeremiah on the under-13s. For example, Alex Nishaste, Bien's older brother, and Mandela Ziati on the under-15s, with the team leaders Kanyu Bia from Liberia and Natanel Mamo from Ethiopia. But Luma also needed to choose newcomers, few of whom had ever participated in organized soccer, and then find a way to get all of her players, rookies and veterans, to work together as a team. First and foremost, Luma needed players who would show up to practices and games on their own, since their parents were too busy to be much help. The boys had to be willing to walk long distances if necessary and to wake themselves up and get ready for games early on weekend mornings. After the trauma of war and relocation, many refugee kids had severe problems. Luma had to keep this in mind. She had learned from experience that she needed about a third of her players to be well-adjusted kids from stable families. They would set an example for the others. Another third of the team would be boys who were for the most part dependable, even if they had a few problems at school or with other kids. The last third would be kids with real problems and unstable families. These were the boys who would require most of Luma's energy and would most likely cause fighting on the teams. They were also the boys who needed the Fugees the most. Luma's 3 teams had their own needs and goals. The under-17s were the most mature and would cause Luma the least amount of trouble. In previous seasons, most of the problem players had left or been kicked off the team. A few players on the under-17s had cars. Luma expected this team to take care of itself. The under-13 Fugees, Luma's youngest team, were a group of boys who had been with her from the first season 2 years before. Some, like Jeremiah, had been with Luma since her very first week of tryouts. Others, like Bienvenue, had joined along the way and made the team the center of their new lives in the United States. Their youth made them the most flexible and the most responsive to Luma's strict discipline. She knew their mothers well, since she frequently spoke to them when their sons acted out or broke the rules. The under-13s had a star left forward in Josiah Sadie, another Liberian whose awkward, toes-first gait masked amazing speed. as well as an experienced center midfielder in Quendrim Bushi, a stylish, mosquito-legged Kosovar who likes to wear bright-colored bandanas around his neck during practice. The under-13's weakness was on defense. The team's best defenders hadn't returned this season, so Luma had to find replacements from the pool of boys who turned up for tryouts. The team was also weak at goalie, desperately so, but that was something Luma had chosen. Her goalies were Eldin Sabisk, a Bosnian refugee, and Quendrim's best friend, and Mofte Jonwe, a heavy-set refugee from Gambia, with a bright smile and a sentimental streak. His older brother teased him for his habit of getting teary-eyed during episodes of Oprah. A goalie, even in youth soccer, needs to be aggressive and sometimes reckless, but Eldin and Mofade were both gentle, happy souls. They could barely jump a foot, and yet the two boys did everything Luma asked of them. They came to practice on time, didn't miss games, studied hard during the afternoon tutoring sessions Luma required her players to attend, and supported their teammates on and off the field. If the boys created a weak link in the under-13's defense, the rest of the team would simply have to work harder on the field to support them. And if they did, Luma felt her team had a chance to win their division. The under-15s were a different story. They had an incredibly talented pool of players, if they decided to show up. Earlier in the summer, Luma had sent word around that she expected her players to get their hair cut short, a rule that hadn't gone over well with some of the under-15's best players. Prince, for example, a quick Liberian, and one of the team's best returning players, had spent the summer growing braids that crossed his head and dangled down the back of his neck in the style of Allen Iverson, the NBA point guard. The braids earned Prince some respect among his peers at school. Girls liked them, and they hinted at gang affiliation, or at least comfort with the dangerous realm inhabited by many of his American peers. Prince had no intention of cutting his hair. He knew he was talented at soccer, and he fully expected Luma to make an exception and let him on the team. Furthermore, some of the other players, particularly fellow Liberians Mandela Zaidi and Fortuny Tarp, looked up to Prince. If he was kicked off the team, there was a chance they might quit. Some people want short hair, some people want braids, Fortuny said. We all don't want to be the same. We want to be different, and playing soccer doesn't have anything to do with your hair. Like teenagers everywhere, the under-15s longed for the respect of their peers and craved a sense of belonging, something that was especially hard for young refugees caught between the world of their parents and the new world of their friends and schoolmates. The boys on the under-15s felt the conflict between the two worlds more strongly than their younger siblings, if only because they had spent more time in their home countries. And finally, there was the lure of gangs. Luma had lost more than one of the teenage refugees to a gang in the past. She knew she would be competing against the gangs again this season. If Luma could find a way to keep the under-15s focused, and if she could find a way to create a sense of belonging and friendship that kept the boys away from gangs, the team could play incredible soccer. It was a hot August afternoon in Atlanta when Luma stepped onto the field and looked over the group of boys who had turned up for tryouts. These kids arrived in blue jeans, long t-shirts, and baggy shorts that looked like pajama bottoms. One wore ankle-high brown hiking boots, as if he were about to go mountain climbing, while another stood ready to play in his socks, which flopped like clown shoes when he ran. Luma took down their names and ages, and with the help of the team manager, Tracy, wrote their names on strips of masking tape, which the women plastered across the backs of the boys' t-shirts. Luma had a few extra pair of unused soccer cleats. She waved over the young man in stocking feet and placed her foot next to it as a reference. In 2 years of coaching the Fugees, Luma had learned to eyeball a young man's shoe size with accuracy. "You're a 7, she said to the boy, before tossing him a pair of shoes. Luma divided the boys into 2 groups and told them she wanted to see them play. As the boys took the field, she cleared her throat, squinted against the glare of the afternoon, and tried to ignore the negative thought that had been nagging her since tryouts had begun. This is a rotten place to play soccer. The field looked worse than it had the day Luma had first seen it. Summer thunderstorms had carved ruts into the baked earth, exposing bits of gravel and shelves of sandstone in the process. A salting of broken glass glinted in the summer sun. There was some grass around the field's perimeter, but most of the playing surface was dug out of dry Georgia chalk. White puffs were released beneath the boys' feet until the field was covered by a cloud of dry dust that resembled fog. Every now and then the dust coughed up a figure, a heavy-set Iraqi man whose gray dishdasha dragged on the ground, a Sudanese man with a henna-dyed beard who walked laps on the track counterclockwise, a wooden staff in hand, and neighborhood kids who wandered freely through the scrimmage as though the field were any other right of way. Luma blew her whistle and summoned the boys in. Sweating, panting, and covered in dust, they formed a circle around her at midfield. "Prince," she said, addressing the Liberian veteran with a head of braids, "if your hair is not cut by the first day of practice, you're off the team." The boys glanced at Prince, but no one said a word. "Practices would take place twice a week and would last 3 hours," Luma said. "The first half of practice time would be for homework and tutoring." Luma had arranged volunteers for that. Tutoring was mandatory. The second half would be for soccer and running. Lots of running. "If you miss a practice, you miss the next game," she told the boys. "If you miss 2 games, you're off the team." "I have 11 spots," she added. "I'm not looking for a superstar. I'm looking for players who are willing to learn." The final roster for the Fugees would be posted on the bulletin board of the Clarkson Public Library by 10 a.m. on Friday, she told the boys. No reason to call before then. "If you don't follow the rules, you're off the team," she said. "There are plenty of kids who want to play. If you do follow the rules, you're going to have a lot of fun." Luma held up a stack of paper, contracts she expected her players to sign, and passed a sheet to each boy. "If you can't live with this," she said, "I don't want you on this team." Hands, white, brown, yellow, black, reached for the papers. As the boys read, their eyes widened. "I will have good behavior on and off the field. I will not smoke. I will not do drugs. I will not drink alcohol. I will not get anyone pregnant. I will not use bad language. My hair will be shorter than coach's. I will be on time. I will listen to coach. I will try hard. I will ask for help. I want to be part of the Fugees."